Hello, friends. Welcome to A Little View podcast, the podcast where the perspective may be small, but the conversations are anything but small. I'm Gwen, your podcast host, a soon-to-be dietitian, a health coach, and an advocate. This is a podcast where we talk about things that aren't talked about. We're the voice for the unrepresented. We're having empowering conversations about healing your mind, body, and soul. And we're bringing on guests to share their inspiring stories. This is A Little View podcast. And I just want to say a little disclaimer that this podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Always talk to your doctor about your own health journey first. Hello, future me is recording this right now, and originally this episode was supposed to go up in March for Nutrition Month, but the end of the semester definitely got the best of me. So instead, I thought this would be a perfect conversation to kick off season 2 of The Little View. And today we have Sam Graham on the podcast. She is a therapist who specializes in eating disorders, which, as you know, I think that is such a important topic. But she also is a little person herself, so she brings a different perspective and one that a lot of my listeners can relate to. I'm just so excited to have her on. So without further ado, I would love Sam to introduce herself a little without her being a therapist.
Without me being a therapist, core of my identity right there.
Like, introduce who you are.
I am Sam Graham. I am a snowboarder. I am a mac and cheese connoisseur. I am a Seattleite. I'm a soccer fan. That is me outside of the job of being a therapist.
And obviously you have a specialty, but what made you get into therapy as a whole?
It was a zookeeper before I was a therapist. So my undergrad was in neuroscience, behavioral neuroscience, and I worked in an animal lab, and I really love animals. So when I graduated and moved up here for a boy, which is a common experience in little somebody, the job I could get with a neuroscience degree was a zookeeper. I worked at Woodland Park Zoo for 2 years, and then I got really burnt out on it. Being in the public in a customer service kind of role is really hard for little people, I would argue. And uh, as much as I love the animals, it was a hard job. So I pivoted and used my understanding of animal behavior and cognition and what I was doing in the animal world to people. And I went to grad school at Seattle U. I did my internship at a children's clinic, and it was the height of the pandemic, and it was a crazy time to enter the field right then.
So you were a zookeeper. Once you realized you were like, I don't want to do this anymore, were you like, I want to go back to school, but did you know at that moment you wanted to be a therapist, or were you like, let's just go back to school and see what we're going to do from there?
When you pick a grad program, it has to be pretty specialized. So
That's true. Yeah.
I wanted to be a therapist.
Okay.
Undergrad, you have so much freedom, but in a master's, it's very specialized. And so I had to pick clinical psychology. And so I knew I would do that. I didn't know I would do eating disorders. I was interested in the neurodivergent population, but that's a very fast evolving population. And I can't keep up with it as much as information is coming out.
For those who don't know, what does it mean, neurodivergent?
Thank you. Neurodivergent is the term, it's like an umbrella term that we use for anybody that's not typically thinking. So maybe they have ADHD, maybe they have autism spectrum disorder, maybe they have obsessive compulsive disorder, anybody whose brains work a little bit differently than the status quo, with attention seeking, like with attention behaviors, with compulsive behavior, with cognition.
And did you work with them at all, or you didn't even end up working with them?
I mean, I think it affects a lot of, like, they're very highly correlated.
Yes.
OCD and eating disorders are best friends. They hold hands. So almost all of my eating disorder clients, we can trace it back. Like, there's a strong comorbidity with OCD, and then ADHD has a lot of food behaviors as well, because food is stimulant. So a lot of food behavior with that. So there, and the depression and anxiety both highly relate to food, body dysmorphia. They all hold hands in some realm.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think you see Obviously, ADHD makes sense, but why do you think you see OCD and eating disorders?
Because OCD is an anxiety disorder, like, the root of it is an anxiety. So you're obsessing about something. You're obsessing about your body usually or your calories. It's just obsessive. It's like you're eating too much, you're eating too much, you're eating too much. That's not good food. That's not good. It's all these intrusive thoughts. That's the core OCD. And then the compulsion is restricting, purging, whatever that eating disorder looks like.
Yeah.
So it's the basic eating disorder pattern falls
Yeah.
so into OCD, if that makes sense.
No,
So
yeah, that for sure makes sense.
not all OCD transfers into eating disorder, but so much of eating disorder can be
Yeah.
OCD.
When I was in treatment for my eating disorder, because I talk about that a lot on the podcast, a lot of times we would refer to the eating disorder voice and like our voice. We would say it as two different things. We'd be like, well, this is Gwen's voice. This is the eating disorder voice. Because, like you said, so many times I felt like the eating disorder voice was like, "Don't eat this, don't eat that. Oh, you're eating too much." That makes a lot of sense, you saying that. And then what kind of how did you get into the eating disorder then?
Yeah, like I said, it wasn't a population that like interested me. It was food is food to me. I was like, okay, cool. But when the heart of the pandemic happened, every single teenager that was coming to me was showing signs of eating disorder. Whether that was binging and like taking all of the food to their room and because they were depressed and like they didn't want to leave their room and so they would binge in their room, whether it was restricting or feeling very insecure about their weight because they were only connecting through social media and they have
Yeah,
only upward comparisons of seeing other people's curated images, so they're really intense about their body. There was just so much and then the need for control. Like, so many kiddos and teens just needed to feel like they were in control because they
yeah.
didn't have control over going to school, seeing their friends, seeing their family, like, doing their activities, and so that was a way for them to show control, was to eat certain foods, restrict certain foods, um, and so it was just everywhere, and then, the more trainings you do to become competent in working with that population, the more invested you get in it, the more connections you make in it. So I got certified in dialectical behavioral therapy because that's kind of the bread and butter treatment for eating disorders. And then once you do that, a lot more clients start coming to you and you start being able to serve a lot more people better. And then you start making referral connections with other people and having professional relationships with people like Seattle Children's and I refer a lot of people back and forth to each other, different hospitals in the area and I refer back and forth to each other. So it's an interesting population and I think it ties in really well with the dwarfism community. I hate making my whole identity being dwarfism. I would argue most, if not all, dwarfs have body dysmorphia. I think the experience of having body dysmorphia in the little people population is very similar to the dysmorphia that eating disorder population has as well.
And now going back to what you said about the pandemic,
Mhm.
would you say when you notice a lot of these patients were having signs of eating disorders, would you say they always kind of had an eating disorder? This just kind of uprooted it or brought it to light? Like, they already had it, and then, okay, during this time, when you're alone, when you're in your head more than ever because there's nothing else to do, then then those traits are gonna come out when they never were really coming to light until then, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I kind of think of it as falling under the diathesis stress model where like mental disorders result from like a combination of pre-existing vulnerability and then environmental stress. So they probably had the genetic component or it was probably in their history or like some sort of early factors for it that and then the pandemic was that environmental stress that kicked it off.
And that model you just said is kinda like a bunch of things coming together all at once, is what you mean?
Yes, it's nature and nurture, basically. So pre-existing vulnerability and then environmental stress.
And what do you think are the biggest misconceptions with this type of population?
That they just want to be skinny, or that they're vain, that they just need to eat, there's, or that they're just fat. You can you can't judge somebody based on what they look like, whether
Sure.
it's an eating disorder, and somebody that may fit the medical model of what quote unquote healthy weight is may not actually be healthy and may have an eating disorder.
Yeah.
Uh, say those are the big three.
Yeah, those I'm sure obviously but I learned there was a lot of people like in my group that had like atypical, I think that is, where it's like they don't look like they have a per se eating disorder. And so many times they've had to fight to get care because so many times people are like, you don't have an eating disorder. Or like your weight is above the BMI, which is crazy to tell someone they don't have something that they clearly have. And what do you think you have to more fight with the patients or do you have to fight with the care team to get them the correct care?
That's a great question. It depends on the situation, and in some cases, it's both. I'm thinking of a certain patient where, like, it was so much work to advocate, like, for them to recognize that they had an eating disorder, get treatment. Like, they knew that their behavior was not healthy, but, like, them to label it as a disordered eating or to eat or eating disorder or for them to get treatment was hard work. And then once they got to treatment, the primary care physician or doctor they got labeled it as bipolar. It was so weird. It's fun to be the bad guy sometimes and be like, "Nope, it's not bipolar." And, like, slam your little clipboard down and be like, "No, I disagree with you." So, clients can think that they have a healthy eating pattern or a healthy relationship with food, but then they say things like, "Well, I shouldn't be eating this. This is unhealthy. I won't be able to eat my next dinner, or I can't eat dinner because I'm eating this now." And it's like,
Yeah.
so I, th- I think both are true. I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think are some warning signs as some of the things you just mentioned? What are some warning signs of an eating disorder?
Obsessive thoughts about body or image concerns, um, restricting food, having purging behavior.
Is there, like, highlighted things people will say to you, especially people who don't think they have an eating disorder, and then while they're talking to you, the one you just said about, like, "Oh, I can't eat my next meal," like, things like that? Is there certain things that the, like, general public might think it's okay to say, but it's like, "Okay, red flag, red flag."
Hmm. Um, Things like this comes into the LPA world so much. So last conference cycle, and I'm sure your listeners understand what conference is. I was talking to somebody and they were like, "I need to get skinny before conference." And I was like, eating disorder. I'm not your therapist, but I'm gonna be labeled like that's not healthy relationship with your body. Or like, somebody told me a myth that we all needed to be under 100 pounds. So there's like these myths that people say,
Mhm.
especially in LPA, where we have
For sure.
misinformation because there's a lack of information and a lack of research
Yeah.
that we spread around, and then it's not healthy.
I think yeah, I think there's uneducated sources that start it, and then I think especially like, I'm sure you see this too, these these I say kids, but these adults hear it as a kid, and then they kinda just grow up with it. It's a fact of ever since I was younger, I always heard, "You are like the height of a 10-year-old, so you gotta weigh that much. Don't weigh too much, or don't eat too much. Make sure you portion control," which, like, what even is that? It's just eating till you're full. That's I don't personally believe in that. Things like that, that, like, perpetuate someone to have an eating disorder. And now more personal, do you think you've ever struggled with body image or your the way you look, especially as a little person?
I think like I said, every door falls into some sort of body dysmorphia because you're constantly only represented. Like, the representations you see of people are average height bodies. We will always look different. So we're born looking different. Dwarf babies, they automatically have the thigh roll that
Yeah.
like,
So cute. Oh, yeah.
but like already there's like rolls that are
Yeah.
into place because of where our bones are and because of where like things are. And so I think I had a lot of problems with my thighs originally. I really didn't like that part, but I remember it was like Seattle conference a long time ago, long time ago. And I saw a dwarf girl. I was a teenager, and so I saw a dwarf girl wearing shorts, and she had really similar legs to me. And that made me feel really validated because I was like, "Oh, it's not me. It's we all have these legs, these like kind of
Yes.
chubbier, thicker like, and then the crease. I don't know if you have the crease in your thigh, but
Oh,
like
yeah.
I have that crease that, and my
Yeah.
friends all had my average height friends all have very long legs. I will say I'm speaking as an achondroplasia experience, and the person
Yes.
references is achondroplasia. But I think having that, there's always a relationship with thinking about that and growing up with certain old mentalities in LPA where people
Yeah.
commentary about food and bodies. This girl was really rude to me. I don't know if it was bullied, but she spread a rumor that I had an eating disorder because I was like not I was bodied in LPA, and that was really weird. I just feel like everybody's really hyper aware of bodies maybe in
For
LPA
sure. Yeah.
because, and when I say LPA, I don't mean like the organization specifically. I mean the broader
Like,
community
for sure.
of
Yeah.
dwarfism. But I as it's a very hyper aware community
Yeah.
and hyper competitive in some ways. And so if you're have one body, you are a problem. And if you have another body, you're also a problem. There's no winning.
For sure. And I think that's such a valid point because once I started being more open about my experience and me having had struggled for so long, a lot of people came to me and were like, "Oh my gosh, thank you for talking about this because I have struggled for so long too." And a lot of what they were saying is what I felt before. Going to LPA and comparing yourself, just like how you were saying, comparing yourself to other little people, being in a world that's not made for you, and then trying to compare yourself to average type people, you're just never gonna look like that. And then coming all together in a big group for a little time, like, and you aren't around that many people in your day-to-day life, I think it's very common for, like, everyone to comparing, like, "Oh, she's so much skinnier," whatever, but, like, that doesn't have to be like that. That's not the importance. That's not why you're there to compare yourself. But I think it's very hard when we see people that are just like us and we think we need to be exactly like them.
I'm sure you know more about this because you talk to so many more people, but there's so many variations just within achondroplasia. I think they're saying
Yeah.
there's 10 mutations within achondroplasia. They were saying 5 originally. I think it was last I hear different numbers, but like so even with achondroplasia, there's so much genetic variation that like it's fair to each of us to compare ourselves to each other. And we also have different races, ethnicities, different
Yeah.
hormones, gender. Like there's so
For
much
sure.
diversity, so it's just not fair to ourselves to compare.
Would you say genetics plays a big role in it as well?
But yeah, about what our bodies look like or what like eating disorders.
About our bodies because
100%.
like just because we eat the same and just because we're both little people does not mean nothing.
No, I mean, people different thyroid, different insulin, cortisol, different leptin, like so many things go into it that it's just not fair that we're expected to be similar.
When you hear these things at little people events, do you say anything or do you just say like, "Eh, whatever?"
It depends on how feisty I'm being and like the spoons I have, I guess. Like when it's an older person and I'm feeling a little feisty and they say things like, "Oh, I don't want to eat this bread because I don't want to get fat." And it's like, why? Why would you, like, what do you mean? And then you challenge that and you're like, what does fat mean? And then like they realize what they say and they're like,
Yeah.
yeah. Or like when they say, oh, I'm so bad for eating this. And you're like, why? Why are you so bad?
Yeah.
I didn't know food was more like there was a morality thing with food. And like, I don't know. Depends on how sassy I want to be. But also, like, with kids, you just kinda, like, say it quietly to them. You're like, "Well, we all have different bodies, or we need to think about that differently," or "You're not gonna eat your cookie? I'm gonna eat the cookie then." Like, and showing acceptance for that and modeling that behavior, I think, is important.
Yeah, I I agree. I think it's very hard for me sometimes, even especially at events like that, to stand out and say stand up and say something because I feel like I often will take it in. So if you're like, "Oh yeah, well, I can't eat this and I don't want to weigh over 100 pounds. I'm 80 pounds right now and I can't weigh any more." In my head, I like automatically think like, "Oh my gosh, like should I start doing this too now? Like, is this what people are thinking? Like, is this what all little people have to do?" So it's like so hard not to be like, hold the brakes. No, absolutely not. No, like say something. Don't just let that fester in your head because that's absolutely not true. And just because someone said that means nothing. And I've shared about this on the podcast too. I mean, not specifically saying the name, but there's this particular group on Facebook that's for little people trying to get healthy. And they often talk about how many calories someone should eat to look a certain way. And I have often been like, no, just because that calorie works for you doesn't mean that calorie works for me.
Sorry, I'm making so many faces because I have you've triggered me. I've seen those posts, and I've seen the workout ones, and I've seen all of it, and I'm like, "Do you have any experience or education to back this up or any credentials?" Or, like, also everybody's body is different, and, like, you're not that specific person's there's
Also, you're a guy. You're a guy. Some of them are guys. And as you just said, just because one, we're both little people, but two, men, women, they're very different vastly because of our hormones. And so it just really irks me. I think I unfollowed the group because not that it was triggering me, it just irks me because I'm like, y'all are spewing things that you have no education on.
yeah, or are very old school, and it's calories are a number, but they're not everything, right? We need vitamins, minerals, we need, like, greens, colors. We need so many different things to keep our body running. We need things to help our eyes, we need things to help our skin, we need things to help our pancreas. Like, calories are not the end all be all. People cling to that number as like a validation of their effort. Their body is okay because I only eat X amount of calories.
I'm going to school to be a dietitian, and we often have talked about the fact of it's not about how much you're eating, it's about what you're eating. Is that making you feel good? How is that making you feel? And that's, I'm sure, what you like to focus on with your clients as well. Like, how does that make you feel? But as in, are you tired from not eating enough? But not how does that make you feel? Like, oh, I feel fat.
Like, no shame towards people who like to eat salads. Love a good gorgonzola, apple, walnut salad. Love that. Love a good Caesar. But, like, I do hear people using that as a cop out when they start feeling insecure about their body or what they're eating, and they're like, "Gotta eat a salad." And it's like, "Okay, well, that just like, where's your protein source there, hon?"
For sure. Yeah.
Salads are great. They give our brains great things. They give our bodies great things.
How do you give clients coping strategies when they're fearful of foods or when they don't want to gain too much weight?
It depends on the client and what their needs are, but first we start with psychoeducation and discussing what sugar is, the difference between fructose and glucose. We discuss where we can find those. We can discuss added sugars in foods, what that actually does to our bodies and our brains. There's so many misconceptions about it. We latch on to these things that we see on Instagram in a slide deck. We're like, oh, this is truth. And it's like, well, actually look up the peer reviewed
Yeah.
articles on that and see. But so we talk about that and like citing our sources about what we see, like
Yeah.
what sugar actually do for our bodies, like I was saying, and then slow exposure therapy and be like, you know what? Like sometimes I model it in session and I'll eat food that they're afraid of. And they will be like, "Oh," or sometimes like, different we do different dialectical behavioral therapy exercises. So
sorry, this might be all bouncing around, but do you think, as you said earlier, that eating disorders are just, I want to look skinny?
I think that's what they are represented as in media, where like that's, just like when people say dwarf, people immediately assume achondroplasia. When people
Yeah,
say eating disorders, they immediately think, "Oh, I'm skinny." Like those, if that makes sense in that analogy,
for sure.
it's so much more than that. It's, people being in bigger bodies. It's people, everybody can have an eating disorder, really. Every age, every gender, every race can have it. And it's interesting to see how it pops up cross culturally. And when somebody tells me they want to go on a diet, does my clinical alarm go off a little bit? Yes. And then we talk about it, and it's like, well, what does that mean? And it's like, well, I want to eat foods that make me feel more energized. And it's like, okay, well, that is different. Diet carries a lot of stigma, I would
For
say.
sure.
And so, what is your intention when you say you want to go on a diet? Is it because you want to quote unquote lose weight and have like a specific type of body? Like, let's talk about that. What bodies are we comparing ourselves to? Like, where can we find gratitude with our body? Where can we find radical acceptance?
I just went to this conference for dietitians. One of the dietitians there was intuitive eating dietitian, and she said she'll oftentimes hear of people that have went on a diet or are wanting to go on a diet, and they're like, I want to lose weight. I mean, she presents to them, or she is telling us per se, most of the time, not only do they not want to go on a diet, diets don't work. Like, there's a diet industry for a reason. It's one of the highest paying industries in the world, and there's a reason why, is because they don't work. So she said when clients come back to me and they're like, "Well, I was on a diet and I wanna feel that good." She's like, "Well, then why did you get off that diet if you felt good?" Because it doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And then going into the fact of, and I know this might sound like I'm changing a subject, but it's all encompassing. And then she was like, and then when they talk about when they try to scare people and say, "Oh, the obesity or the America's so overweight," which I'm sure it is in some way. But at the same time, yo-yo dieting is the highest it's ever been. So let's think, like, dieting, overweight population, like, they all go hand in hand because of the fact that when these people diet, once their body is like, "I need food," they go back to it, but they, like, eat so much because the body has been starving so long, so they get ravenous, so it's like, yeah, maybe there is an overweight population, but let's look at the reasons why instead of just trying to scare people and say, like, everyone's overweight. So then it's scaring people when it's like, no, first of all, moderation. But second of all, there's a reason why these things like this are being said. And there's also a correlation between diet and then people gain a lot of weight later on because it's not sustainable.
Yeah, we live in a capitalist hellscape. So, like, if there is a product or a service to sell, people are going to sell it. And if they can make money on somebody's insecurity, that's what the diet culture is. Yeah.
This might be a little controversial, but do you experience clients that have eating disorders and they're on
Yeah.
GLP-1s? Yeah.
Is there more to that? Yes, I do have clients.
What is your opinions on all this?
It's hot. I'm not a doctor.
My thing is, in my area of specialty, obviously it's for diabetics. It's to lower the blood sugar levels. It is very helpful for diabetics, and it also helps with them to lose weight because diabetics need to lose weight because if you have visceral fat, which is fat around your organs, it's more it worsens your diabetes. So, yes, very valid for these patients. But when someone is not diabetic, what bothers me is we live in such a anti-fat world that we're like, "No, you need to go on this because you need to look like this." as in the fact is that so many little people, their doctors have tried to have them go on it. Why? 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 There's no reason. Why don't we talk about like healthy eating? Why don't we ask them? Why don't we get them? Why don't we call Sam and have her be the therapist? Like, why don't we do productive things instead of just being like, you know what? I think you need to get on a shot to make you lose weight.
I agree. I think, I don't have diabetes. I don't have that experience. If that is a resource for them, for people with diabetes, like, glad they have it. I think, are we treating a medical issue or are we treating social stigma?
For sure. I
And so
yes.
I think that's where I'm at. I'm interested to see what the long term result of this will be. If I turn on Hulu and I watch a TV show, I am cheap, so I have the ad version.
Yeah.
Every single fucking commercial is a GLP-1, and
Yeah.
it's everywhere. And so I'm interested to see, one, how socially we're going to evolve with this. Like, are we going to accept this as normal? I just think there's a lot of different interactions at play there that are harmful.
And do you think these ads or this perpetuation of GLP-1s gives the message to people that they need to look a certain way?
Yes. I have a client and he is a string bean. And like, that's not a medically defined term, but like he's a string bean. Um, he is on GLP-1s. And I was like, why? And he was like, well, I have this little bit, like, he was pointing at his stomach, but like sometimes I think it's something that's getting overprescribed right now. And again, what's the intention of having it? Is it to treat a medical condition or is it to create, is it because you've been bullied or you have insecurity or like whatever about your weight? Is it for social acceptance? Like, why are we unhappy with our body right now?
Because I'm much bigger than all my friends, so I wanna lose weight. It curbs my appetite, so it's great. Like, it doesn't make me hungry, and it also doesn't give me any food thoughts, so it's perfect for me.
Do you feel like you're eating enough during the day?
No, no, I'm not hungry.
Yes, I hear that, and that is a consistent dialogue. It's like, well, I love the not having food thoughts. And you get to a certain point where you don't wanna argue someone's core belief, like they're not there yet maybe, or like they don't wanna hear it or whatever. I have a client that is on GLP-1s just because, like, they don't like the food thoughts, and, we've talked about other strategies to deal with food thoughts. To a certain extent, it's not on me to be like, "That's wrong." I'm not here to speak for all of eating disorder, but I'm just speaking from my own thoughts that I would like to know the intention behind that and work on the intention and the root of that instead of treating the simple anxiety of it.
And do you think there's still a lot to be done in the little people community with diet?
Yes, one, we just need more research on it. There's no research on little people. As someone I'm writing my I just finished writing my thesis for my doctorate. I'm defending in May, so get ready to start calling me doctor. But there's like 5 studies on dwarfism. If you even want to limit it to achondroplasia, very little. We need people like you to research more, and I'm sure you're going to do this in your master's, like research nutrition for little people and get more literature, get more publishing on that because that's important to
Yeah.
be able to share. I think having these conversations about food and having them, talking about it. Like I hosted through LPA a eating disorder group and it was so well attended and it was all women and they all said, I've struggled with food and body like my whole life.
Yeah.
I am so glad that there's a space for this to talk. And so I think being open to these conversations and having these conversations continuously and not being afraid of having conversations, having people that are qualified therapists and skilled in treating little people or people with different disabilities with food is very important. There's so much stuff that can be worked on from this.
But I think there's something to be said, you being a therapist, I think there's something to be said about representation of a disabled person, of a little person in the community, because I feel like people are gonna listen to advice more when someone is not quote unquote norm. Like if you if I was struggling with an eating disorder and I'm talking to Sam, I'm gonna listen to you more because you get me. You get me on a whole nother field. Do you think you're able to advocate more? And also, do you think clients understand you more because of who you are?
Yes, I think, somebody told me one of the reasons I became a therapist is one summer I was a camp counselor. It was my senior year of high school. And these kids kept coming up to me and like trauma dumping. And that there wasn't a word for that back then.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gen Z, for creating trauma dumping. But they would trauma dump and be like, I'm bullied at school. My parents are abusing me, X, Y, or Z. Like, and I was like, oh, this is weird. Like, they just keep coming up to me. And somebody was like, yeah, because they can see your insecurity. You're wearing it on, like,
Yeah.
show up as your insecurity. So they feel like they can share their insecurity with you. So I, put that in the back of my mind for when I did become a therapist. And I do think it is a helpful tool because people look at me and they're like, I mean, they don't want to assume, but they assume I have body dysmorphia to a certain extent
Yeah.
of what my body looks like. And so I think they feel more open in talking to me about that. I also think that because I don't fit a food model or a nutritional model that's out there right now for the most part, other than, eat a well balanced diet, eat vitamins, minerals, eat rainbow foods, that I have so much, I shoot down all of the other stereotypical food things. Like, oh, you need to be like eating X amount of calories, you need to be eating this or this or this. I shoot it all down. And so I think that makes it helpful. I think people in mental health treatment do better when they have a therapist that looks like them. That's, that's researched in the Black community and ethnic groups, Latin American communities. There are dwarf therapists, but as we're a very diverse geographical location, like population, like we're all over. I'm in Seattle, you're in Detroit. It's hard to find those therapists that are qualified that meet your specific thing. And so, I do meet with people one off and be like, let's just talk about your body real quick. But yeah, I think there needs to be more representation in the community. It'd be cruel to have a therapist in every state, so every dwarf can be seen by somebody because my license
Yeah.
covers Washington.
And I even think not even representation like that, but I think people need to stand up more. When you go to, per se, little people events, because a lot of my listeners are little people. So when you go to little people events and you hear these things, that's not true. Don't just assume just because someone said it that it's right. Question. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time just because obviously you're a wife, you're a mom, you're a therapist, you got to balance it all. So your time is valuable. And we could have this conversation for so long. But I want to end with my last question I always ask my guests is what would you tell Sam or someone else who is struggling in their body currently?
I tell everybody that we're just in meat suits that flop around the earth. And yes, we can put a lot of money and time into what our meat suits look like, but at the end of the day, they're just a meat suit to get our organs and our brains from point A to B. You need to put gasoline in a car to make a car go, and you can't move a car without gasoline. You can put Supreme, you can put Premium, you can put regular in, but either way, you just got to get going. I also remember my friends that love me, and I like to wear nice clothes because that helps.
For sure.
It makes me feel powerful.
As we're wrapping up, I just want to say thank you so much, Sam, for being on my podcast today and talking more about things that are so not talked about. And I know we went into so many different conversations, but I think this whole conversation was very important. So thank you so much. And I hope everyone listening got something out of this. And I hope that if you did, share this to someone else that needs to hear and make sure to like and subscribe for more episodes. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.